Last night I was driving home in my car and I was listening to a fascinating podcast. The podcast was on unconscious bias. What's unconscious bias? Well, unconscious bias in a business context is that trap that we as leaders can quite inadvertently fall into, where we may be looking to promote someone into an area of greater responsibility or greater seniority, but the criteria we use to make those decisions is not entirely merit-based, despite our best intentions. Examples of this could be we're looking at things like the way someone appears, how they look, or their racial background, or their gender, which clearly have no bearing on whether they'll be good enough to do a particular role. And the danger of doing this is that we can have teams that are less diverse. And there's any amount of research that suggests teams with greater diversity produce greater diversity of thought, greater diversity of ideas, and ultimately better results because there's more chance that the optimal answer will come out with such a diversity of approaches and backgrounds. So we know this. This is not new information. But unconscious bias is definitely a thing. It's definitely out there. In fact, in Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink, he reveals that in the United States, 14.5% of the male population are 6 feet tall or higher. But in the cohort of Fortune 500 CEOs in the United States, 58% of that group are 6 feet tall or higher. That's a classic example of conscious bias at play in the real world. So how do we avoid it? Well, it's challenging because this is not something we do intentionally. And the reason we use bias to make decisions as humans harks back to our prehistoric brain as a survival mechanism. Not useful now, though, in the current business context. The number one way I've found to mitigate and avoid unconscious bias as a leader is to seek feedback. Feedback from your team and your peers on decisions that you're making can be very powerful because people are looking at things from that third-party lens, stepping back from it like the golf coach looking at your swing. They can see things you can't see. Now, how do you create an environment where people will give feedback in a way that is without fear and is genuine and honest? Well, that's up to you as a leader. If you're regularly in the habit of seeking opportunities to get feedback from your team, great two-way exchanges of information, connection, if that's part of your business as usual way of working, when you need feedback on important things like unconscious bias or anything else that may be developing in the workplace, that feedback will be given freely and without fear of reprisal. And that is a beautiful place to be as a leader. Setting up feedback mechanisms as part of your daily operating rhythm, your cycle of dealing with your team, will serve you well in so many ways, and it will definitely help you defeat unconscious bias.